all we've been looking at this week is leadership, okay? And we've talked about really theories to explain what it takes to make a leader, or what attributes a leader has. So we've looked at this trait theory, and people are born with it. We looked at the behavioral theory, as that people can learn it by various behaviors that they learn. And we've also looked at the more modern approach, which combines a couple of those together, which is called the "it depends," or more formally, the contingency approach. And so we looked at those all week, and I put up little videos, I think, for all three. They should be there. Now, this last section in this unit is talking about substitutes. So I would suggest that today we will do, we're going to look at the substitutes. Then I have a little self-evaluation exercise that we're going to do. And depending on where we are, that will be the thing we're going to do today. On Monday, I have another exercise to do, plus a case, so that will be Monday's class. Tuesday's class, if there is a Tuesday's class, yes, Tuesday's class, we're going to go on to the next unit. We're going to introduce the next unit, okay? And then we will not have a class next Friday, because what I want you to do now is, I said at the very beginning of the term, we'll only use Friday classes when we need them. So next Friday is an opportunity for you to get these your project done for this course, which is the 20 articles, right? So I'm going to give you some time to do that. So I'm suggesting that this, unless we fall behind or some reason, this will be the last Friday class that we're going to be holding, okay? And that way you can get that project done in that time slot. And we should be able to cover the material that we need to cover just perfectly fine. So that's kind of like the big picture casting forward of where we're going. And I've also put all that stuff up online, and you can see that. So without any further ado, let's look at this issue of substitutes. All week we've been talking about, you know, leaders and what it takes to make leaders, but now we're asking, wow, do we even need leaders? Are there situations that are out there that we can do something that will provide the things that leaders do, you know, to be able to kind of focus people towards the organizational objective, that is. Is there some way that we can do that without having a physical person do it? Okay, so what we're really looking at is there something out there in the world that potentially could either substitute or help support leadership? And there's been a lot of research done on this, obviously, because in organizations, and the focus on lean organizations and being able to do more with less, this is something that has really been a focus of the last 20 or 30 years. So the previous three theories argue that leaders are needed, but that leaders should consider the situation in determining the style of leadership to adopt. However, numerous studies, more recent studies, have collectively demonstrated that in some situations, leaders are just not necessary. And so the question is then, in what situations does that happen? Well, it really depends from the situational perspective on the employee. Okay, that is a big factor, the employee. And we got to think about the employee's individual ability. Do they have the ability to manage their own work? Do they have the ability to lead themselves? Do they have an ability to do the job without too much direction? Do they have the requisite skills and experience to be able to do the job without some hand-holding? Have they been trained to do it well? Do they have the knowledge? And are they motivated? Do they have that motivation to move forward by themselves? And do they have an overall professional orientation? And if the answer to those are yes, for most of those are yes, the amount of leadership that is required is less. So do we need to say that all those things are essential to eliminate leadership? Probably you need them all to eliminate the need for leadership. But certainly we can reduce the amount of leadership that is required if people have those innate abilities to do the job, the experience to do the job, the training to do the job, the knowledge to do the job, the motivation to do the job, and the basic professional characteristics to do the job. And I think we've seen a lot of that in our world in the last year. You know, the people working at home to be able to get the job done. That was a big concern a year ago. You know, if we're going to send people home, my gosh, you're going to be sat around doing nothing. The reality is, though, that some preliminary research has come out and said that productivity actually hasn't gone down that much. In fact, yesterday the Stats Canada reported that productivity levels have gone up actually, and that you know, things are doing very well in the economy relative to the situation that we're in now. I'm not saying that things are doing very well in the economy. I say things are improving in the economy relative to the current environment that we're in. Okay. So, so those sorts of things really are held up to say, you know, we don't necessarily need leaders, or we don't need leaders to be actively involved when we have those boxes ticked. And so organizational characteristics kind of help that out, such as clear, formalized goals, some rigid rules, procedures, cohesive work groups, basically the team-based work groups, can replace formal leadership, while indifference to organizational rewards can neutralize these effects. So if people don't really value the rewards that the organization give, that's certainly something that's not going to be helpful there. Neutralizers make it impossible for leadership behavior to make a difference. So if another thing from the employer's point of view that we need to work about, okay, is, are the jobs routine tasks? You know, is this something that once you figure it out, you can do it? Is it a relatively routine task? You know, I would argue that potentially you would look at my job and say it's a pretty routine task. You know, I've done organizational behavior since I started this in 1984 as a student. I've done this course probably 30 times, right? So it becomes a pretty routine task. My job is fairly highly structured. You know, we meet at this time every week. This is what we do. The jobs where routine feedback is common. You know, you guys are the feedback loop for me, and I think we get some relatively good feedback and high intrinsic rewards. When I see you guys, I'm telling you, that's what keeps me in this job, is when I see you guys. And this is the problem with this situation, is I don't literally see you guys, but when I see you guys working, when I see my students, I go into places of business around this town and I see my former students working, probably running the shop there now. That's a big intrinsic reward for me. And you know, so I would suggest in the college, for example, the college is a good example of where we don't need really intensive leadership. The other thing that comes into play from an organizational point of view is clear organizational goals. Is the organization absolutely crystal clear on what it needs to do? Or do we have rigid rules? You know, the bumpers on the pool table are pretty close. You don't have a lot of room to wiggle. You know, you need to do this and that and the other thing. It's like flying an airplane. You know, people who fly airplanes, do they need management to tell them how to fly the airplane? Certainly not, because the rules are fairly rigid, and you don't want to crash the plane. So, you know, these things lend themselves to jobs that don't need extensive leadership. And cohesive work groups. We've talked about that in our section with teams and groups. You know, if you can have a good work group, the work group, if it's very clear on its goal and people can work together, the team itself will be a self-managed work team. It really doesn't need strong leadership. So this little graphic right here that's in your textbook kind of summarizes all of these. So we've got it broken down into 3 sections, as I've just done. Characteristics of the individual. You know, do you have experienced people who are trained, that are professional, that are really not focused so much on rewards? You know, we can easily substitute those things for leadership. If the job lends itself to being a highly structured, provides its own feedback, and it's intrinsically satisfying, you don't really need heavy-duty leadership. And if the organization has clear formalized goals, rigid rules, and cohesive work groups, you don't need heavy-duty leadership. So this little video here, I'll just show this. This kind of covers this same.
A perspective on leadership that's received considerable attention in recent years has focused on alternatives to leadership. In some cases, circumstances may exist that render leadership unnecessary or irrelevant. The factors that contribute to these circumstances are called leadership substitutes. Let's take a look. Leadership substitutes are individual, task, or organizational characteristics that tend to outweigh the leader's ability to affect subordinate satisfaction and performance. In other words, if certain factors are present, the employee will perform his or her job capabilities without the direction of a leader. Unlike traditional theories, which assume that hierarchical leadership in one form or another is always important, the premise of leadership substitute perspective is that leader behaviors may be irrelevant in some situations. Individual ability, experience, training, knowledge, motivation, and professional orientation are among the characteristics that may substitute for leadership. Similarly, a task characterized by routine, a high degree of structure, frequent feedback, and intrinsic satisfaction may also render leader behavior unnecessary. Thus, if the task gives the subordinate enough intrinsic satisfaction, she or he may not need support from a leader. Explicit plans and goals, rules and procedures, cohesive work goals, a rigid reward structure, and physical distance between supervisor and subordinate are organizational characteristics that may substitute for leadership. Research has provided support for the concept of leadership substitutes, but additional research is needed to identify the potential substitutes and their impact on leadership effectiveness.
Okay, so that kind of summarizes what we just talked about. So what I'd like to do this morning is this particular leadership style questionnaire. The other day we talked about various leadership styles. So I'll just slide back here now to show you. Go back to this. Okay, this one right here. If you think about leadership styles, we looked at this. Okay, this continuum where we had autocratic leaders on one side, which is really people that tell you what to do, and there's not a lot of room for movement there. They're authoritarian. Here's what I want you to do. Now go do it. And across the continuum there, we roll across on the far end to transformational leaders who are very much charismatic characters who lay out a vision and articulate a very clear vision that people are willing to follow, and they will follow it and achieve the goals. And in between, you have transactional leaders that are just focused on, okay, you do this for me, I'll do that for you. Or laissez-faire, which are really leaders that just watch things happen. They don't get really involved. They're hands-off leaders, and you question whether they're leaders at all because they're not doing any leading. But as we've just seen with substitutes for leadership, that laissez-faire might work in certain situations. And democratic leaders that are very focused on incorporating ideas from the workers into the process. So these people are they go out, they want to consult with the workers, ask them questions, ask them what their thoughts are, and incorporate those things into decisions. So we saw this continuum of styles. So this exercise right here that we're looking at this morning, if I can get down there, this really is focused on, this exercise is focused on allowing you to determine where you potentially fit on that continuum. So we have, I think it's 5 questions, and I moved the slide and I mismoved it, so apologize for that. Okay, we have 2, and there should be 1. I think I inadvertently erased the slide. Just hang on. Let me see if I can get that back. Okay. Insert image, upload. This one here, open. Yep, Okay, there we go. So what we got is 6 questions. And what you do is you ask the question, you answer the question with the best potential answer that you see from your perspective. Okay, so you're going to take a look at that. Just hang on. And then what you're going to do, each of these possible situations corresponds to one of 3 styles. So what we're going to ask you to do is, once you've gone through the questions, okay, so you're going to have to write this down somehow. You're going to have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and what you picked, A, B, C, D, A, B, C. And then you're going to put them in this chart right here. And we're going to assess where you here we've got in problem 1, the group needs direction. Voting would not be useful. A non-directive approach might work in the long run, but be frustrating in the short run. C would be the best decision. So they're saying C would certainly be the best one in the case of problem number 1. In problem number 2, there is no problem. And this is exactly the if it ain't broke, don't fix it argument. So they're saying A is the best solution. In 3, the group is productive, but not everyone is contributing. The group needs help, but a directive approach might cause a rebellion. Okay, non-directive style would not get the quiet ones involved, so going with B would be the better option there, they suggest. In problem 4, similar to 2, the group is working well, so resist the temptation to take any more than needed. So they're saying that A would be the better option in 4. In 5, the group was all right, but now it's not. Leadership is required. Non-directive A, leadership, will only worsen the situation. If you vote B, frustration will get in the way of reason. And C, directive leadership would be the best bet in 5. And in 6, the democratic leadership is called for here. A directive B approach would oppose the group's stated position. And since the group is at the stalemate, solution C, a non-directive style, would not help. So you can kind of assess where you fit along those. I didn't help a lot here, and